The types of missing person cases that I think are particularly interesting are those where the person who goes missing is either in a crowded place, so very difficult to disappear, at least without people seeing you, or they are oddly in touch or actively engaged with people around them when just like that they're gone. And so today I'm going to focus on 3 missing person cases that fit that description. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right channel, because that's all I do, and I upload 3 to 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's something that might interest you, I would encourage you to take the like button's computer mouse, turn it over, and tape over the sensor underneath, and then hide and laugh at the like button when their mouse doesn't work. Also, please subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. In 2008, Brandon Swanson was a 19-year-old college student enrolled in a community college in a little town in Minnesota called Canby. The town had a population of less than 1,000 people. He lived in Marshall, Minnesota, which is about 30 minutes away and was only slightly larger than Canby. Brandon was in his sophomore year at the community college and planned at the end of the year to transfer to a much larger 4-year university where he would complete his degree. On the last day of classes that year, on May 13th, Brandon and some of his friends decided to go out and celebrate, because not only did they now have this nice vacation, but for Brandon it was a big deal. He was getting ready to transfer to that larger school. So that night, Brandon met up with his friends kind of near where they went to school. There was a couple different backyard barbecue type college parties going on, and Brandon was having a good time with his friends, and at some point a little after midnight he decided he was just ready to go home. He was tired. Instead of taking the preferred route, which would have been Highway 68 back to his home in Marshall, Minnesota, he decided to take some back roads. Later, when police were interviewing some of the people that were at those 2 backyard parties that Brandon had attended, they asked how much was Brandon drinking. And they all said that Brandon wasn't really drinking at all. We saw him with 1 beer that he wasn't really drinking, and it seemed like he really was just tired. He wasn't looking to party, and he left and seemed very sober. As Brandon is taking these back roads back to his home in Marshall, Minnesota, he ends up getting into a minor accident, but his car gets stuck in the ditch. So he can't get his car out of the ditch. He's totally stranded. The first thing he does is he calls his friends that were at the parties with him, but no one's picking up their phone. So at some point, he's probably pretty embarrassed. He ends up calling his parents and says, "Hey, I'm totally fine, but I'm letting you know I got into an accident. I'm near Lind, Minnesota. Here's the directions of how to get here. I need you guys to come out here and help me get out of the ditch." And so Brandon's parents say, "Okay, we'll come out and meet you." They use Brandon's directions to get out to this area right near Lind, Minnesota, which was only about 10 minutes away from Marshall, Minnesota, where they lived. They make their way over to the spot, and Brandon's father calls Brandon and says, "Hey, we're here. I'm gonna start flashing my lights as I drive down this road that you've sent us to." And so Brandon's like, "Okay, I'm looking for you. I don't see you, but I'm looking for you." He had given them really specific directions to where he was. And while they stay on the phone with each other, Brandon's father would flash his lights repeatedly and drive all around the area that had been described as where Brandon was. When Brandon keeps saying that he can't see their car, he doesn't see their lights, he begins to describe again how to get to where he is. And he's telling his parents, "Did you turn on this road? Did you come down this way? Are you near Lind, Minnesota? Are you sure you're where you need to be?" And his parents would respond, "Are you sure you're giving the right directions? Because we're here. We're flashing our lights and you don't see us." At this point, Brandon gets in his car and he starts doing the same thing, flashing his lights. Granted, he can't move his car, so it's only one direction, but he's flashing his lights and he's telling his parents, "Do you see me? I'm flashing my lights." And they both were unable to see each other. Both parties being very frustrated with each other, Brandon just says to his father, "Listen, I'm gonna just walk to Lind. I can see the lights right there. I have a friend in Lind that can probably help me get my car out of here. I'm just gonna walk over there. It's probably like a 30-minute walk to Lind. I'm gonna walk towards the lights." Later, when police interviewed Brandon's father would say, it did not seem like Brandon was drunk. It didn't seem like he was confused. He seemed totally lucid and very easy to talk to. We were having a very normal conversation. Brandon's father stays on the phone with Brandon, and for 47 minutes, Brandon walks down this gravel road away from his car on the phone with his father. His father's just waiting for him to get to Lynn so he can, breathe a sigh of relief, make sure his son's okay. And as he's walking towards these lights that Brandon believes is the town of Lind, Brandon all of a sudden goes, "Oh shit!" And then the phone cuts out. Brandon's father's like, "What just happened?" Tries calling him back, no answer. Brandon's father and his mother start driving all over the place, yelling out their window for Brandon, and they can't find him. They end up calling the police, who use Brandon's phone records to generally figure out where he had been when he was on the phone with Brandon's father. And it turns out he was nowhere near Lind. He was 25 miles away in a town called Taunton. So this huge search is launched for Brandon, and there's no sign of him. They never get in touch with him on the phone. They never find his phone. They never find anything to do with Brandon. He just disappeared after seeing something on the road after walking towards some set of lights that he thought was Lind, but it wasn't. It was Taunton. But was he really walking towards town, or what was it? What were the lights he was walking towards? To this day, Brandon's family leaves their front porch light on in hopes that someday Brandon will just show up again. In 1953, Ronald Tommen was a sophomore at Miami University in Ohio. He was a business major, and he was living in a dorm room inside of Fisher Hall. Fisher Hall was a converted insane asylum, and all the students there believed that Fisher Hall was a haunted dorm. It was one of those places where you tried to stay away from if you could. On April 19th of that year, Ron was in his dorm room inside of Fisher Hall. It was very snowy outside. He was listening to the radio and reading a book. At 8 p.m., he must have thought about getting into bed, and when he did, he pulled back the sheets and found that someone had left a dead fish in his bed. And so at 8 p.m., there was an official request from Ron to get new sheets sent up to his room. At about 8:30 p.m., we don't know what it was, but something disturbed Ronald enough to where he ran out into the hall. We don't know what it was. People think it was a disturbing sound or someone yelling for help. We don't know. It's totally speculation, but something alerted him so quickly that he dropped everything he was doing. He left the radio on, lights on, book open, all of his ID cards, his wallet, everything, his shoes, everything stayed in his room, and he ran out into the hall. When his roommate came back at 10 p.m., the door to their room was open, and he saw that all of Ronald's things were just laying out. The lights were on, but there was no sign of Ron. Okay, maybe he left and went to his frat house because Ron was a part of a frat. But the next day, when he couldn't get in touch with Ron, he ended up telling authorities that his roommate had been missing since the night before. When police began investigating, they saw that he had been studying a psychology textbook before he ran out into the hall. And he had actually dropped the only psychology course he was taking 3 weeks earlier. His car was still parked right outside the dorm. There was still a couple $100s inside of his bank account. And because he had not taken anything from his room, people believe he basically left in a t-shirt and shorts with no money, no shoes, no anything. A woman living 12 miles away from the campus would later report that the same night he went missing, a man looking like Ronald Tommen, matched his description exactly, showed up at her door. And she opened the door and she said he was visibly frightened. He kept looking around like something was after him, but he seemed very upset. He was totally disheveled. He didn't have a jacket on. He didn't have shoes on. There was no car outside of her house. So this kind of crazy looking guy comes up to the door and he says, "You got to tell me where the bus stop is. I got to get out of here. Where's the bus stop?" And she pointed down the road. He immediately turned and he ran away. And that was the last anybody saw of him. 5 months before Ron ran out of his dorm room to investigate some sound in the hall, or whatever it was in the hall, he had gone to a coroner's office to ask to have his blood typed. And the coroner said in 35 years, he's never had someone come to him and ask him to do a blood type for them. Ronald could have just gone to a local physician on campus to do that for him. So it seems strange that he would have gone to a coroner, of all people, to get his blood typed. Tommen's parents said they spoke to him a week before he went missing, and they said there was nothing unusual about him. He seemed like he was happy, well-adjusted. He had no clear stress in his life. It just didn't add up. To this day, no one knows where he is, and no one knows what he heard in the hall that made him run out and then ultimately vanish. In 2006, Brian Schaffer was a 27-year-old medical student at Ohio State University. He had just lost his mother to a battle with cancer. He was feeling very down, and so his roommate, Clint, decided it would be a good idea on April 1st, which was the end of their classes, there was a little bit of a break coming up, that they should go out and just take his mind off of what he was dealing with and go out to a bar and have a good time. Brian agrees, and so on April 1st, the two of them make their way to the Ugly Tuna Bar, which was located in downtown Columbus, Ohio. Just before 10 p.m. that night, Brian stepped away from the Ugly Tuna to make a phone call to his girlfriend. Her name was Alexis, and she was also a medical student at Ohio State. On the call, there were some niceties exchanged. He said he loved her, and that would be the last time she ever heard his voice. After Brian came back into the bar, Brian and Clint decide they want to leave the Ugly Tuna and do a little bit of bar hopping. So they go to a couple different bars right outside and eventually meet up with one of Clint's friends named Meredith. The three of them continued bar hopping until Brian and Clint decided they wanted to go back to the Ugly Tuna. Meredith offered to drive. So they drive back to the Ugly Tuna, and at about 1:15 in the morning, security cameras right outside the Ugly Tuna pick up the trio walking into the bar. At about 2 a.m., that same camera picks up Brian Schaffer stepping out of the bar and speaking to two college-aged females before at some point saying goodbye to them and walking back into the bar. At some point between 1:15 when the trio arrived and 2 a.m. when Brian is seen alone outside with those two other girls, Brian and Clint and Meredith got separated. Clint and Meredith tried calling him, they tried yelling for him, they couldn't find him. They assumed he must have got tired and just left the bar at some point because he only lived 6 blocks away, and if he wanted to, he could walk home. So they don't think much of it, and they ultimately leave the bar to head home themselves. The following day, Brian's girlfriend, Alexis, tried giving Brian a call, but it went straight to voicemail. She figured he could be sleeping off a hangover, so she didn't think much of it, but as she called him all day long and never got through, she started to become worried and asked Brian's father, Randy, if he could swing by Brian's apartment and just check in on him. When Randy arrived, Brian was not there, but his car was there, and his apartment looked untouched. The bed was still made. There wasn't any signs of Brian having been there recently. At this point, Randy communicates with the police, who immediately launch a huge search for Brian. And the police, they review the footage from the Ugly Tuna, and it shows Brian along with Clint and Meredith making their way into the Ugly Tuna at 1:15 in the morning. Then it shows Brian leaving at 2 a.m. to speak to those two college girls that were outside the bar, but then he goes back into the Ugly Tuna. There is no video footage after that of Brian ever leaving the Ugly Tuna. There was one other exit from the Ugly Tuna that was not covered by a camera. However, it was under very heavy construction and in no way appeared to be a regular exit. It was completely blocked by construction materials, and there was no sign that Brian had ever even gone near that exit from all of the other cameras inside. Police went to surrounding buildings that had cameras pointed in any way near the Ugly Tuna to try to pick up some sign of Brian leaving the bar after 2 a.m., but there weren't any. It was like he went into the bar and never left. And they searched the Ugly Tuna. They looked everywhere. He was not there. To this day, no one has any idea what happened to Brian. Is he still inside the bar? And if he left the bar, how are there no cameras anywhere that are able to pick that up? There was lots of cameras looking at the bar and looking outside the bar. How did he vanish without anybody knowing? Unfortunately, we probably will never know what happened to Brandon Swanson, Ronald Tommen, or Brian Schaffer. But that doesn't mean we can't speculate. So I'd love to hear what you think happened in each of these 3 cases. I'll do my best to respond to as many comments as I possibly can. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos like this one, I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to steal the like button's computer mouse, turn it over, and tape a small piece of paper to the underside, turn it back over, and then hide and make fun of the like button when their mouse doesn't work. Also, please subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly 3, 4, even 5 video uploads that sound an awful lot like the one you just heard today. If you want to get in touch with me, you can send me a direct message on Instagram. My handle is johnballin416. I'm also very active on TikTok, where my handle is Mr. Ballin. And if you have a story suggestion for me to use on this channel, please submit it to the subreddit called Mr. Ballin. So no matter where I see you, whether it's on Reddit, Instagram, TikTok, or here on YouTube, or some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support. I love making these videos, and until next time, see ya.